Hey guys, and welcome back to my channel, The Appalachian Home. So in today's video, I'm going to be experimenting with sublimation on wood. If you don't know what sublimation is, you can look at my video I did a while back. I'll link it up above. But we're going to be sublimating on wood, and you can also do this with Cricut Infusible Ink and your Cricut heat press. So I'm just going to be using some pine 1x6 boards that I've cut down to about 5x5 squares. You can cut these any size you want. I'm going to go ahead and just lay these out and sand them. I'm using a really fine grit sandpaper. This one I believe is about 220, and my DeWalt sander, which I really love. But I'm going over the edges and the sides, and when I get to the corners, I'm just swiping those corners down about 3 times just to knock that really sharp edge to get a really good smooth finish. Now I'm just taking a damp paper towel and I'm just wiping off all the sawdust from the wood. You want to make sure and get a really smooth finish when you're sublimating, because it does make a difference. If your surface is not really smooth, you will not get a good heat distribution and your image will look really weird. Once I get all my sawdust cleaned off there, I'm just using some white paint and I'm placing a couple layers of white paint. You can make this as opaque as you want to. I'm using Kilt's white paint, and this is in the satin finish, and I just got this one at Walmart for around 24 bucks for a whole gallon. And I'm just going to let this dry in between coats. This dries fairly quickly. I think I waited around 2 minutes between each coat. And then I'm just going to take that same sandpaper and lightly sand off all of those ridges. If you sand against the grain, then you will get rid of any grain marks that your wood leaves in your paint. So now I'm going to be applying this thin coat of Polycrylic. I got this at Lowe's. It's around $17 for 1 quart, but I'm going to be placing a thin layer over all of the paint. I'm using a foam brush to apply this, which seemed to work the best. A light coat is more than enough to do your sublimation. So now I'm ready to print off some of my images. I have all of my images ready and sized. I'm actually using Inkscape to print off my images, but you can also use Cricut Design Space and use the print then cut feature to print all of your images. But if you're using Inkscape, you want to go to Document Properties and make sure that all the images you're going to print are inside this little box here that you see, and this is the outline of your page. You can go to Document Properties and make sure your page outline is turned on, and then just go to print. And I'm going to select the printer I'm using, which is my Epson that I showed you guys a few videos back that I set up to do sublimation. Now I'm going to set up my printer properties. I want to make sure that the quality is high. I'm using premium presentation paper in a matte finish, and I want a print preview, and I also want to mirror my image. Whenever you're doing sublimation, or if you're doing infusible ink, you want to mirror your image. That way it prints or cuts out backwards, and when you place it on your surface, it will be facing the right way. If you want to use infusible ink, I'll link a video on how I cut out my infusible ink projects. Now I'm just going to go ahead and print out the rest of my designs and cut around them, and then I'm just going to tape those down to the face of those wooden blocks where we put the polyacrylic. One thing I almost forgot to do before we place those images on the blocks is lightly sand the polyacrylic. You want to make sure all those little tiny bubbles and just little tiny specks are completely off of your surface so that you can get the best quality possible when you're sublimating. So I'm just lightly sanding again with that fine grit sandpaper. Now I'm going to be using my heat press. This is a Starcraft heat press. I've got it preheating to 385 degrees. I'm using a Teflon sheet underneath the blocks. I'm also going to put parchment paper and another Teflon sheet on top of these. You can also do your Cricut Easypress. I tried the Cricut Easypress on another wood sublimation project, and 400 degrees was definitely too hot, so I would start out at 385 and definitely do a test piece before you do an actual project. But I'm going to leave this in there for 60 seconds. I'm doing all the blocks at once. I would suggest doing one block at a time. That way you'll get a better heat distribution. Some of the tops of these came out a bit fuzzy, and I think it's because some of the blocks were a little bit different thickness. One thing you need to know when you're doing sublimation is that your sublimation paper will stick a little bit to your wooden blocks. That's where you put the polycrylic, but that's completely normal. We're just going to take a little wet sponge and wipe off the rest of this paper. Your sublimation ink is going to remain on the polycrylic once you remove the paper. So this is the finished product and how these turned out. I hope this video gave you some inspiration and some great ideas for early projects for fall. If you guys have any questions, leave them in the comments. Thank you so much for watching this video. I hope you really enjoyed it. I still have some craft fair items that I'm making. I'm going to do some more videos on that, so subscribe to my channel if you like that kind of content. Again, thank you guys for watching, and I'll see you in my next video.